What's up, guys? It's Analyst, and we're back with week 2 of the fantasy football season. I hope you guys had a good week 1. If you didn't, let me know in the comments exactly what happened, who you started, who let you down, because I know a lot of people were let down in week 1. So, not a big deal if you started 0-1. If you started 1-0, you're on a good path, but you definitely want to stay there, right? So, we're going to look through, as usual, all of the matchups for this week. The Thursday game already happened at the time of this recording. But I got my notes here, some pretty detailed notes on just about every single fantasy relevant player you could ask for. So to help me out, if you guys could like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know any feedback you have for these type of videos, and let's jump straight into it, right? So we'll start first with the Dolphins going into Baltimore to take on the Ravens, currently at a 44.5 point total. Ravens are favored by 3.5. Makes sense. So starting with the Ravens side here, Lamar still worried about that it doesn't sound like he's worried about that contract, right? The reporters try to ask him about it. He's dodging those questions. So don't expect any answer on the Lamar Jackson contract talks anytime soon. Regardless, he's playing, so he's not holding out. Running back wise, J.K. Dobbins practiced in full. He is likely to play in this game. I would just watch out for Kenyon Drake being more involved than we'd hope, especially as a pass catcher, because Drake only had one target when he was on the field, but he did play for 17 pass plays this past week, and he led all Baltimore running backs with a 59% snap share. So Kenyon Drake, I feel, is still going to be involved in this offense, meaning Dobbins is not going to be alone. This is his first week back after what we just learned was a major injury, right? Not just ACL, but MCL, meniscus, and I think he even mentioned something else was torn in his knee. So the injury was a lot more severe than we thought. So don't be surprised if he has a slow start when he gets back on the field. I don't necessarily love the matchup against the Dolphins either. When it comes to the wide receivers, Bateman had a catch that kind of saved his week last week. So Bateman you can keep rolling out as a flex / low end wide receiver 2 and decent wide receiver 3. Devin Duvernay, though, a bit fluky, right? He had 2 touchdowns last week, a 13% target share, a total of 4 targets. 4 of the 2 catches that he had were touchdowns. And I just don't think that's going to happen every week. He happened to get the good end of the stick last week, so don't bet on Duvernay doing that often, right? So I'm going to fade Duvernay going to this week. I did like the involvement of Demarcus Robinson. And I think Andrews is going to get a touchdown in this game. That's a little bit of a bounce back. As for the Dolphins, we can go into the Dolphins side now. I'll jump to Edmonds, who played 37 snaps, which is 63%. And honestly, that's higher than I thought. Because I'm not a huge Edmonds guy. I was in the belief that the Dolphins, right? Because they're just replicating what the 49ers do. That they were going to go into this and they were going to use some sort of rotation. I thought Sonny Michel was going to stick with the team. Raheem Mostert would be more involved. But it's looking like Chase Edmonds playing 63% of the snaps, 16 touches. So, yeah, I think Edmonds is going to be their 1A at the very least. He had 2.1 yards per carry, so not great. His 4 catches for 40 yards definitely saved. He saved his fantasy week. He got some high praise from the coaches just today, so I'm expecting Edmonds to be flex / low end RB2 for the rest of the season. So we'll see if that continues here against the Ravens. I'm fine starting him as a desperate flex option or low end running back 2. I mentioned there was no snaps for Myles Gaskin. It was just him and Raheem Mostert. And as for the wide receivers go, Tyreek Hill is a must start every single week. He's proved that with Tua. He's going to get a huge target share. And when it comes to Jalen Waddle, look, if he didn't get that one catch over the middle and broke away for that touchdown, then Waddle, we'd be talking about whether you should be worried about Waddle going forward or not. But he did have that breakaway touchdown. And he's bound to get more of those, especially with Tyreek on the hill as well. So Tyreek on the field as well. So yeah, Waddle, I'd call like a wide receiver 3 flex, similar to Bateman. I think I'd put Bateman over Waddle, but Waddle in a similar conversation. Gesicki, you just can't start right now. I didn't even go into the stats. I didn't even do any research on Gesicki. I just know they're not using him, so you don't have to use him either. So next game here, we got the Cleveland Browns at home taking on the New York Jets. Browns favored by 6.5. Current point total is 39.5, so that's pretty crappy. When it comes to a game, you don't want anything under 40 or close to 40, really. So 39.5, crappy point total. 6.5 point a favorite for the Browns. This is going to be a game where you can use both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. That seems like the way they want to run this offense while they wait for Deshaun Watson to rejoin the team. They both played over 50% of the snaps, so they were running a lot of two running back sets. Hunt played on 68.9% pass plays, and Hunt played 57.1% run plays. So when the guys are on the field, they do have specific roles, right? So Chubb is the runner, Hunt is more of the pass catcher. Hunt can do a little bit more of both, which gives him value, even though Chubb is the better running back. So both these guys are startable this week against the Jets. Okay. Wide receiver-wise, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper both played 83% of the snaps, except Donovan Peoples-Jones led the team with 32.4% target share, which is 11 targets. So DPJ is kind of taking the early lead as the wide receiver one for this team. Obviously, it's just 1 week, but he's someone I'm stashing. I want to see if this is true. I am not starting Amari Cooper. If he can't even out-target Donovan Peoples-Jones or the running backs, he just doesn't seem worth it to me to start. So I'm going to sit Amari Cooper. Not that I was drafting him anyway. Or if you guys followed me, not that you guys drafted him anyway. Next up, we have the Jets. So Michael Carter, Breece Hall. I mean, each of these guys, 60%, 45% of snaps, 60 to Michael Carter, 45 to Breece Hall. Carter had 19 opportunities, right? And Breece Hall had 15. So the spread was, it was there. Breece Hall, 15 opportunities and 45% of carry, 45% of the snaps. That's pretty good, right? So I think both these guys are playable within reason. Breece only, he barely made it to 10 points. He had 9 targets as well, which really helped. But a big part of that is when Joe Flacco throws the ball 59 times, these guys are bound to get the ball more. So I think they're going to try to do a little more running this game. I do still think that I like Michael Carter over Breece Hall. So if you, for some reason, have the two of them, I'm starting Michael Carter. If you're worried about Breece, he's like a fringe flex play for me, right? So in PPR, because I think they're going to be forced into throwing the ball here as well. But low-scoring game. Going to have to rely on a lot of the catches. They do have wide receivers who are going to get some work in as well. Speaking of that, Elijah Moore, he had a 12-yard touchdown called back. And this is coming from Fantasy Guides, by the way. So if you guys don't follow Fantasy Guides on Instagram, it's Steve. He's a buddy of mine. He's got a good team there. They do a series called Missed Points. And basically they go over Elijah Moore had a 12-yard touchdown called back, which could have added X amount of points to his point total. And this guy was 1 yard short of the end zone. There was a pass interference call on this, which would have resulted in this many points. Like Travis Etienne is a perfect example of that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. He could have had easily over 20 points, but he ended up with 8 instead. But yeah, Elijah Moore had a 12-yard touchdown called back, 7 targets. He's got a good matchup in the slot against Cleveland, and he's the only wide receiver on the Jets to play more than 70% of the snaps. So Elijah Moore is still operating as that team's wide receiver one. I am okay with starting Elijah Moore, and I'll add him to the conversation with Rashad Bateman and Jalen Waddle. I think I'm going to put probably Bateman first, then Waddle, then Moore. And that's how I'm going to order these guys, all flex/wide receiver 3 plays for this week. So, I'd probably even put Moore at the top of that list, now that I think about it. I put him over Bateman and Waddle only because the targets were more so there for Elijah Moore, and I do believe in more of the playmaking ability on him. So, he has more of a chance to act as the primary receiver. Next up, we have the Lions at home hosting the Washington Commanders. Despite the Lions being 0-1 and the Commanders being 1-0, Detroit is taking the early favorite with a 1.5 point advantage against the Washington Commanders. 48.5 point total. I think they can beat that. I think this is going to be quietly a high scoring game, but let's jump into the Lions here. So First with the Lions, we have quarterback Jared Goff. I think he's a decent streamer if you need to. Again, it's not like one of those things that I'm super excited about. Next up, running back DeAndre Swift. He did not practice Wednesday. He did not practice Thursday. He rolled his ankle in the second quarter, but finished that game. As of today, Friday the 16th. Friday the 16th. He did practice. So Friday the 16th, he did practice. He got a limited practice in. He said not to worry about. He'll be out in that field, but I would hold Jamal Williams just in case. Throw him on your bench. You never know. During pregame warm-ups, he's not feeling it. He does not get the final say, unfortunately. But if Swift is healthy enough to play, I'm starting. Right? Amon-Ra still owning the slot. He's going to be that weekly PPR wide receiver 2. TJ Hawkinson, 7 targets last week, which is encouraging. You just kind of hope for a little more, right? You just hope that he can get that consistency up, and I don't really know if he's going to do that. As for the Commanders, I mean, Wentz had a good game. I'm not expecting that every week. He had 4 touchdowns. If this turns into a pass-heavy team, and that's just kind of how they want to operate, then okay, let's start to buy in more on that. But that was just one game of a sample size. So, again, I don't want to put too many of my chips in the same bet. I don't know what the saying is. I apologize. But if we start to see more of that from Carson Wentz, then I think it's more of a time to buy into Wentz and this offense. I think is a decent streamer as well. Running back wise, Gibson, surprise. He played 64% of snaps. He had 22 opportunities. He's going to be a running back 2/flex going forward until Brian Robinson comes back. Then it might shake things up a little bit, but his involvement in the passing game was really encouraging. Now, when it comes to these Commanders wide receivers, we can break it down like this. So, Terry McLaurin turned 4 targets into 58 yards and a touchdown, right? And here's the routes ran by each of these guys. So, Terry ran 42 routes, Dotson ran 40, Samuel 36. Snaps, Terry had 90, Dotson 88, Samuel 71. Targets, Terry 4, Dotson 5, and Samuel 11. So essentially, Terry led the team in routes ran, he led the team in snaps, but he just trailed when it came to targets. And, sometimes that's just how the game goes. What I feel is that a lot of teams, when you game plan for a team, you're not game planning necessarily. Like, you're not going out of your way to game plan for a guy like Jahan Dotson or Curtis Samuel, especially when these guys haven't really done anything, right? So, going into the game, their game plan for the Panthers last week was to don't let Terry McLaurin do Terry McLaurin things. Now, going forward, Commanders against Lions, yes, you have to game plan for Terry, but now you look at last week's film and you say, okay, now we got a game plan for Curtis Samuel in the slot. We got a game plan for Jahan Dotson opposite of Terry. We can't just throw all our attention to Terry because then they'll beat us with these other guys. So I think it's going to open up things a bit more for Terry. I'm going to like him a lot more going forward. These Lions corners got burned last week by A.J. Brown consistently, and I think Terry can do just about the same thing. So I'm liking Terry this week, and that being said, I also do like Curtis Samuel a little going forward. 11 targets, Carson Wentz targeting the slot. We know how much he loves to do that. So Curtis Samuel going forward, Jahan Dotson, not as high on as Curtis Samuel, but I do like Dotson. He did catch, I think it was like 2 touchdowns he had, so keep an eye on those guys. As far as the tight ends go, so Logan Thomas, one of my guys going into this year, played 62% of the snaps. Thomas ran 26 routes. John Bates, the backup, ran 18 routes. Thomas had 6 targets. Bates had 1. So it seems like Thomas is the clear tight end 1 on this team. This was his first game coming off major injury. I'm assuming he'll be more involved as time goes on. So Logan Thomas, if you need a tight end, backup tight end, he's your guy. You can pick him up, right? Next game here, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Again, according to Fantasy Guides on Instagram, right? And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier with these missing points. ETN had 15.8 missing points in week 1, including 2 botched touchdowns. He would have been the RB4 if he got those 2 touchdowns. So I believe one was a missed pass from Trevor Lawrence, or he was open and he didn't look to him. and another he fumbled or went short or whatever the case was. But Etienne easily could have had 2 touchdowns last week. This is a game where, as you can see, the Colts are expected to lead. They're favored by 3.5, 45-point total. So I think this is going to be a game that favors Etienne over James Robinson. I don't think anyone was expecting James Robinson to be as involved as he was. So when Etienne was on the field, they ran 81% of Etienne's plays were pass plays, and James Robinson about 62. So they did a lot of passing this last game. Etienne did just slightly outsnap James Robinson, 51 to 49%. And when it came to touches, J-Rob had 13, Etienne had 8. So again, I think this is going to favor a passing scheme. Etienne, when he was on the field, they were doing 81% of the passing. So I'm going to say that Etienne is a decent start this week against the Colts. And we saw what Rex Burkhead did with his involvement last week against the Colts. So I think we're going to see something similar for the Jaguars. As for Christian Kirk, he played 91% of the snaps last week. He had 12 targets. Christian Kirk is easily someone who I'm putting back into my lineup this week. We don't really have too much on the Colts side here. Nyheim Hines is always desperate flex in a PPR league. And Michael Pittman, no practice Wednesday or Thursday. He's currently questionable going to this game. So if Pittman doesn't play, I am expecting a lot more involvement. And I'm just checking real quick because I'm getting updates about a whole bunch of different players here. So I want to make sure nothing, some George Kittle stuff, Mac Jones stuff. Okay, Najee. Okay, cool. All right. Just checking. But, yeah, I don't really have too much else to add for the Colts other than Alec Pierce not being in this game, potentially Michael Pittman not being in this game, which could mean one of the tight ends, again, not clear, and I'm not really interested in any of the Colts tight ends right now, but Nyheim Hines would get more work. Moving on here. Flipping my notes. Guys, by the way, this is not like a blank sheet of paper, right? This is like, I don't know why I do it on yellow paper. But regardless, these are my notes for each week. I go through it, look at the matchups, I do some research, and I say, exactly how I want to look at each of these players. But anyway, Saints at home hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay only favored by 2.5, and that's for a reason, because Tom really struggles against the Saints, but we'll get into that. We'll start with the Saints, right? Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. With all the weapons that Jameis Winston has, he's easily a weekly start. I think he's going to be a low-end QB1 by the end of the season. Getting updates now that Alvin Kamara is listed as questionable due to his rib injury for Sunday's game. There's a chance he may not play. If he doesn't, Mark Ingram also dealing with an ankle injury. He would likely be the start, but even then, Mark Ingram is not someone who I'm totally ready to buy in on, and he's also listed as questionable. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm touching the Saints running backs if Kamara's out. I think I'm just going to leave it as is. But if Kamara is playing, you draft him first round, early second round, you're starting. Wide receivers. For me, Michael Thomas is a guy who's a must start, right? And it's interesting because Jameis in the first half, if you're like keeping up with the scores, one thing you mention is like you see in the first half is like, okay, he's not really, he's got Jarvis Landry, he's got Kira Olave, he's got Michael Thomas. He's not thrown at any of these guys. He's barely thrown to Kamara. Some of the tight ends are involved. Like, it's just, the offense is just not looking like they just added 3. I say added because they added Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave, but now Michael Thomas is playing for the first time since 2019. So I looked at this offense and I'm like, all right, well, yeah, Chris Godwin's out. Boo-hoo. So we'll talk about that. But, yeah, so anyway, it seems like Jameis Winston kind of forgot he had these weapons in the first half of the game. And the second half, we saw Michael Thomas score 2 touchdowns. Jarvis Landry got over 100 yards. Chris Olave started getting some involvement. So I think with those receivers kind of established going into this next game and kind of building that chemistry with Jameis, we're going to see Michael Thomas kind of return to form as a wide receiver 1. He's going to reclaim his throne as a wide receiver 1. I think Michael Thomas had literally 0 points going into the second half, maybe like 1 catch, and then he came out of the game with 22 points. So Michael Thomas is making a comeback. I'm not necessarily very bought into Jarvis Landry in this game. That's okay though. I think he's a PPR flex play, and Olave, I do still want to see some more involvement before I start, getting him. So as it sits right now, that's how I view these Saints wide receivers. Also something to mention, Juwan Johnson is slowly emerging as this team's... oh, wow. Bucks running backs, and this is why I love recording at this time on Friday, because I get all the updates while I'm recording. Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, and Brashad Perriman are all questionable going into Sunday's game. So it is up in the air if any or all of these guys are going to play. I'm expecting all of them to play, to be honest, or else they'd probably be ruled out now, but we'll see. Keep getting sidetracked. Juwan Johnson, tight end for the Saints. He played 74% of the snaps. He ran 32 routes. Taysom Hill only ran 4 routes, and Adam Troutman only ran 4 routes. So a little bit of a tidbit there. Keep an eye on Juwan Johnson as he's acting as the Saints tight end 1. Also a fun little tidbit. Chris Olave led all Saints wide receivers with 74% of the snaps. Just as a rookie, in case you're wondering. So there's that. And Michael Thomas also only played 61% of the snaps. So that's also going to increase. He was questionable leading up to the game. He's healthy this week. He's not limited. Michael Thomas will be back. As far as the Saints go, Brady has... okay. And now Bucks left tackle is doubtful. So Brady's going to be without his left tackle. He's going to be without Chris Godwin. Mike Evans, Russell Gage, Brashad Perriman, all questionable going into this game. Julio Jones also questionable. I don't know if I said him. So yeah, that's why I'm leaning away from starting Tom Brady in this game. Not only that, but he has a terrible history against the Saints in Tampa. All time in the 4 regular season games, he's 0-4 against the New Orleans Saints. He averages 13 points again against the Saints, 13 points a game. And he, including the playoff game, which is 5 games, he has 60% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and that's in 5 games. So that last stat includes the playoff game against the Saints. 8 touchdowns in 5 games. That's not good. That's less than 2 touchdowns a game. So all that combined with missing his left tackle, one of his starting wide receivers, having the rest of his wide receivers all be injured. He's 45. Not that, that's really stopped him. But and he's going against the team where he typically struggles a lot. And they just added Tyrann Mathieu. Now, try to avoid Tom Brady if possible. If you have another guy on the waivers that's worth starting, yes. But if you got to roll with Brady, I don't think it'll be the end of the world. I'm just not a fan of this matchup. So, Lenny also limited. Thursday, there's a chance he may not play, but based on the report and the fact that he's practicing, I would imagine that Leonard Fournette plays in this game. Godwin, and if Leonard Fournette plays, you're starting him. Godwin's already out. Evans did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. I did not see the official practice report today for Julio or Mike Evans, but whichever of these guys are playing, I'm going to start. If Evans is playing, I'm starting him. If Julio's playing, I'm starting him. And I imagine that both these guys, at the very least, do end up playing. No matter who ends up being out, I am not more interested in Cameron Brate, if that makes sense. If theoretically Julio Jones and Mike Evans both missed as well as Godwin, I would not be like, oh, thank God we can start Cameron Brate. No, I just would not be interested in Cameron Brate still. All right, let's try to speed through some of these. I don't have too many notes for the Giants and Panthers because the guys who you should start are kind of obvious, right? For the Giants, you're starting Saquon Barkley. Outside of that, maybe Sterling Shepard. He only had 2 targets, but he played 72% of the snaps, and he ran 18 routes. So Golladay ran 20 routes. Sterling Shepard ran 18. I would imagine they get Shepard more involved, and he kind of starts to act as this team's wide receiver 1. He did have a long touchdown. He's coming off injury, which could have spoken to his lack of involvement, as well as the fact that Barkley is just taking all the touches now. But I would assume he gets more involved going forward. That's all I really have to say for the Giants side. As for the Panthers side, you're starting CMC. And when it comes to Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, 8 targets. DJ Moore, 6 targets. The only 2 wide receivers to play 100% of the snaps going into this game. Third was Shi Smith, who played 70 or 60 or something like that. But Yeah, not overly hyped about either Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore. I am still preferring DJ Moore because I think he's just the better player. Whether that comes to fruition is going to be questionable. So I would still start DJ Moore, and I would treat Robbie Anderson as like a desperate flex, but I'm not expecting anything big out of either of those guys. Next game here, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the New England Patriots. Najee practiced in full. He will play. He will start. Don't worry. Wide receiver-wise, if we're looking for the breakdown here, Chase Claypool played 92% of the snaps. Deontay Johnson, 81. George Pickens, 71. So these are the three bona fide starters for this team. Deontay Johnson, 10 targets. Claypool, 5 targets. Pickens, only 3 targets. But interestingly enough, I mean, Claypool and Deontay Johnson both ran 38 routes, and George Pickens ran 37. So it's really just kind of the luck of the draw last week that Pickens wasn't targeted. He was only targeted 3 times. Because of the fact that he is a full-time starter and he is running the same amount of routes as Claypool and Johnson, I would not be surprised to see Pickens at any point kind of get that blow-up game. And for this game against the Patriots, with how bad their corners are, I would not be surprised if it's this game, right? I'm not saying to start Pickens. I'm just saying if you're really desperate and you want a shot in the dark, George Pickens could be your guy. Freemuth also, he ran 31 routes, and he had 9 targets. He was on the field for 89% of the time. So Pat Freemuth every single week is going to be just that plug-and-play tight end. He's not going to be that elite tight end one that you're looking for, but he'll do enough. He'll be like TJ Hawkinson last year. That's kind of what Pat Freemuth is going to do. As for the Patriots, I'm not excited for Mac Jones in this game, right? Because they got some offensive linemen injured. Ty Montgomery just went to IR. They have no receivers. They're not using their tight ends. They're not utilizing the running game. The play calling is crap. So there's no way in hell you're starting Mac Jones. I don't know how the Patriots are favored in this game based on what we saw last week against the Dolphins. I don't know. But no more Ty Montgomery. He's on IR. No one knows exactly how long that's going to be. Has to be minimum 4 weeks, but it could be longer. Stevenson last week only played 25% of the offensive snaps. It's just not something that you're really excited about if you drafted Ramondre Stevenson. Damian Harris, he had 2 targets, 10 touches, and played 39% of the snaps. Stevenson, 25% of the snaps. We did not see Stevenson come in and be that pass-catching guy that he was hyped up to be. But with Ty Montgomery, who also played over 30% of the snaps, not in the picture, the expectation is that Stevenson can come in and be that guy. So I don't hate Stevenson in this matchup if you need a desperate flex in a PPR league. Other than that, I'm not starting Harris. I just think the Steelers' defense, with or without Watt, is still just a force to be reckoned with. So I'm not touching Damian Harris. I don't think they're going to be able to establish that ground game that they should. I don't trust anything down the field either. I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick's a beast, and if you're going to try to lob the ball up to Devontae Parker or I guess Nelson Aguilar on the other side, you're not going to have a lot of fun. So Jacoby, I also don't love. Look, the only Patriot maybe Ramondre Stevenson in a PPR flex, and this sucks too, because as a Patriots fan, my game plan going into this game would be like, all right, let's utilize Hunter Henry, let's establish that ground game, let's try to get this offense rolling without having to rely on Mac Jones too much. But I don't know if we're going to get that. So that's how I feel there. Next game, we reached the 4 o'clock game. We had the Los Angeles Rams hosting the Atlanta Falcons. Rams are favored by 10.5. 46.5 point total. About the Rams, Stafford, I imagine if the Falcons learned anything by watching film, or at least watching the live game against the Bills, is that Stafford should be under constant pressure. Grady Jarrett and whatever they can muster up on the defensive line, maybe do more blitzes with guys like Michael Walker. But, yeah, I mean, if the Falcons are smart, they're going to put Matt Stafford under pressure. I would still imagine Henderson goes into this game as the starting RB1. McVay did say he's excited to see how Akers will respond to basically getting benched last week, but for the time being, I'm calling Henderson the RB1A of this offense, and I'm expecting him to carry the load here against the Falcons. And with the 10-point lead, that's never a bad thing for a running back. When it comes to wide receivers, the biggest question is Allen Robinson, right? Because nobody's questioning Cooper Kupp. Of course, they're starting Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson was open a lot. I don't know if you guys saw, like, there was a clip of, like, Allen Robinson's routes. He was open on just about every single one of his routes. He played 97% of the snaps, ran 48 routes, and he had only 2 targets. McVay even said himself he wants to get Allen Robinson more involved. I would imagine we see a bit of that in this game. But it's one of those things I got to see first to believe, right? So Cam Akers, Allen Robinson, I'm not going to fully bet in and put these guys in my lineup until I see that come true during the game. So I'm avoiding both those guys. Tyler Higbee, 9 targets. He ran 46 routes, which was just 2 under what Allen Robinson ran. A little bit fluky, but the upside is there. I mean, without Gerald Everett, we've seen kind of Higbee act as the lone tight end one for this team. He's got upside, and it's not hard to be a top 10 tight end for fantasy football. So I can imagine Higbee definitely doing that this week. As for the Falcons side, Patterson, I'm expecting him to continue to be a mid to high RB2. Damian Williams was ruled out for this game, so Patterson, I'm still going to start him as my running back 2. He had over 65% of the snaps, 27 opportunities, and over 100 yards. So Patterson's going to keep killing it. Even if that comes in the form of pass catching in this game. For the rest of the team, Drake London, even with an injury, led all wide receivers with the 72% snap share. So he played 72% of the snaps. He ran 30 routes, and tied the team with a 21.2% target share next to only Kyle Pitts. If you guys watched that Thursday night game, which I'm sure all of you did, Jalen Ramsey got absolutely obliterated. Right, so if you're Jalen Ramsey or if you're the Falcons offensive coordinator, you saw what happened last week to Jalen Ramsey, you're gonna look at Drake London on Ramsey. So London's a guy who I'm starting as a flex every single week, PPR, standard, whatever the case may be. I'm liking London a lot. When it comes to Kyle Pitts and the concerns with Kyle Pitts, I mentioned that London ran 30 routes, Pitts ran 28. Pitts had the same amount of targets as Drake London. He played 84% of the snaps, which was more than London played. I'm just, luck of the draw last week, right? Like Kyle Pitts catching 2 out of the 7 targets. It's not because he dropped 5 passes. It's just the targets just didn't work out that way. And I think with Drake London kind of establishing himself a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kyle Pitts be much more involved this week. So I like Kyle Pitts for this game. Do not bench him based off of week 1. Next game here, 49ers versus Seattle. So San Francisco 49ers starting to get some concerns about Trey Lance. He looked bad against Chicago, and I don't know if you guys saw that video of him after. I'm not going to get into specifics, but definitely not what a losing quarterback should be doing after the game. I mean, what you do in your own time is what you do in your own time. But in my opinion, unless you win that game, you don't, that's not how you should act, right? Or at least don't publicize it, right? Because he had to have known someone was taking a video. There's flash and whatever. So if you guys know what I'm talking about, go to Twitter. Just look up Trey Lance video. I guarantee you it'll be the first one that shows up. So 49ers 8.5. I don't know, man. I think the Seattle Seahawks did a little better than 8.5. I mean, they really gave it to the Broncos. It could just be a lot more meaning into that game for them last week, but don't count out Geno and the Seahawks right now. They're technically leading the division at 1-0. So, yeah. But for the rest of the team, Jeff Wilson, he's the plug and play, right? He's the RB1. Elijah Mitchell is going to miss a couple months with an injury. So I imagine Jeff Wilson comes in here. He's going to play. He's going to get bulk of the carries. Jordan Mason and Tyrion Davis-Price are going to be those complementary pieces. And based on how they do with their touches, Shanahan might ride a little bit of the hot hand, but Jeff Wilson is going to start this game, and he will get most of the work, if not just early on, right? And you have an 8.5-point favorite, so you have to imagine game script is in that favor. Wide receiver-wise, obviously you're starting Debo, but when it comes to Ayuk, I'm not going to start him in this game. Theoretically, this matchup is good, and I think Ayuk is in a position where he can be a factor. There's supposed to be rain in this game as well, so Trey Lance and the 49ers just can't escape the rain. But again, I don't know. It just kind of seems desperate to start Brandon Ayuk until we see Trey Lance kind of do something that impresses us. So, avoiding Ayuk. As far as Penny goes, I mean, he played 69% of the snaps. He had 15 opportunities. He had 5 yards per carry. He ran 19 routes, had 3 targets. Travis Homer ran 11 routes. So it seems like Penny is the favorite as the pass catcher, which is not something we expected. I think we expected more of a DJ Dallas or someone like that to come in and handle that work. Kenneth Walker might be active for this game. So if he is active, that could take a little bit away from Penny. But overall, I'm still, rolling with Penny as that flex play. Other than that, Metcalf is the only other person in Seattle I might trust. He's got 25% target share last week in their win. But I think his upside is just substantially lower than what it's ever been. So Metcalf catches 7 balls for like 30 yards, and he gets you through the week. But I'm not excited about him. We'll run through some more of these games here. We got the Dallas Cowboys at home taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. No Dak this game. Bengals favored by 7. So game script here should favor Pollard. I mean, I don't imagine the Cowboys being up in this game. So I'm fading Zeke a bit here. I'm just going to jump straight to CeeDee Lamb. You guys might have noticed CeeDee Lamb is on the cover here because I have a lot to say about him. He only caught 2 of the 11 targets thrown to him last week, but he did play 97% of the offensive snaps. And that's only happened once in his past 3 seasons. So I think he's going to get more targets. He's clearly operating as the wide receiver 1 of this team. Again, it's not like they weren't trying to get him involved. He had 11 targets. It just didn't work out that way. And last year, Cooper Rush played week 8, started week 8. CeeDee Lamb he caught 6 of those 8 targets that Rush threw for over 100 yards. So I don't think CeeDee Lamb is necessarily screwed here. I also do like Dalton Schultz. As for the Bengals side, we saw Joe Mixon get like 9 targets. He had like over 30 touches. I think he led all running backs. Maybe him and Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be close, but he was very much up there as far as touches. So I'm assuming Joe Mixon runs into this with a 7-point lead and just runs for over 100 yards. He's mildly involved in the passing game. So Joe Mixon's going to do his thing. Wide receiver-wise, T. Higgins is questionable for this game. If he does play, if Jamar Chase plays, which Jamar plays Chase, he's not injured. I don't know why I said if he does play. But Jamar Chase, you're starting, obviously. T. Higgins, you can also start him if he's playing in this game. I just don't know how much they're really going to need to pass. So I'm not going to start Tyler Boyd unless T. Higgins is out. Let's run here to the Denver Broncos hosting the Houston Texans. So given the matchup and how good Melvin Gordon looked last week, I think we can start Gordon in this game as a desperate option. I mean, Denver's favored by 10. So Javonte is going to get his work. Gordon's going to get his work. They'll probably try to run out this game, save face after last week, and move on with it. So, yeah, Melvin Gordon, if you're desperate, he's a good option. He had 14 opportunities, including, I think it was like 11 or 12 rushes and 2 or 3 targets. So, yeah, and also the coach mentioned that, I don't know if it was the offensive coordinator or whoever, but they said running backs are crucial to this offensive game plan as far as being involved in the passing game. So there's that. Also, Albert O, the clear number 1, if there's any question about it. Again, just kind of a hit or miss player, right? 6 targets, over 5 targets is great for a tight end, just not enough to kind of cash in on. So proceed with caution for Albert O. As for the Texans, look, Dameon Pierce, only 29% of the running back snaps. Burkhead had 71%. Burkhead had 22 opportunities, including 8 targets. I think Burkhead's the play here, guys. Again, trailing by 10, potentially. I think Burkhead's going to be the one who's on the field the most. Dameon Pierce, I love you, but it's going to take some time, right? And when you originally drafted Dameon Pierce, and if you're able to draft him beginning of August, end of July, you're getting this guy in the 10th round. And he's a stash, right? He's someone you keep on your bench until you're at a point where you can start him. And then once he gets to that point, you start him every week. As of right now, early on into the season, this is just not the time to start him, right? There'll be games in the future where Dameon Pierce is going to go off, but right now is not the time. I'm starting Burkhead. I'm keeping Dameon Pierce on the bench for right now. Other than that, we're not really too much to add here. If you have Brandon Cooks, you're starting him. O.J. Howard, don't think he's going to become anything. He had 2 catches, which were both touchdowns. So just kind of, again, luck of the draw. As for Las Vegas and Arizona, 51.5 point total, which is great. Las Vegas favored by 5.5. Cardinals just looked awful last week. So running backs for the Raiders, Josh Jacobs had 60% of the snaps, but only 11 opportunities. So 10 carries, 1 target. Not great for Josh Jacobs. Brandon Bolden, 28% of the snaps, only 5 opportunities. I'm a little worried about what Derek Carr is going to do in this game as far as is it going to be enough that Renfrow is going to be involved. But hey, I mean, look at what Patrick Mahomes did to this defense the week before. So don't be surprised if Carr gets a good game in there, throws 2 or 3 touchdowns. Renfrow, I think you could start him as a flex play. As for the flip side, Kyler's going to do his thing. Marquise Brown, he got saved by the touchdown last week, but you're still starting him because he is the only option for this team, or at least it's looking like that right now. James Conner is still going to be heavily involved. Guy I do want to talk about is Greg Dortch. So Rondale Moore ruled out for this game. Greg Dortch had 9 targets. He ran 42 routes, which was the same as Marquise Brown. So it wasn't like, oh, Dortch kind of involved. No, Dortch is a full-time starter on this team without Rondale Moore. So 9 targets, 42 routes, 91% of the snaps. AJ Green had 74%. So you are starting Dortch in this game without Rondale Moore. This is a game where they're going to have to catch up. They're going to want to move the ball down the field. Dortch is going to be that guy. So Dortch is my start. Green Bay versus Chicago, potentially a bounce-back game for Aaron Rodgers. RELAX, relax. A.J. Dillon, 51% of the snaps. Aaron Jones, 61% of the snaps. Just like we thought, they are running a lot of 2 running back sets. A.J. Dillon, 16 opportunities. Aaron Jones, just 10. But Aaron Jones ran 28 routes as opposed to A.J. Dillon, who ran 16 routes. Both these running backs are very startable in this game. So start A.J. Dillon, start Aaron Jones. As for the wide receivers, that's another story, right? So Watson, 66% of the offensive snaps. Sammy Watkins, 67. Romeo Doubs, 57. Alan Lazard is entering this game, so he kind of walks in as a flex play. But for the most part, just no one sticks out in this wide receiver room. So I'm avoiding all wide receivers. Although, interestingly enough, Christian Watson did drop a wide-open 75-yard touchdown last week, which if he caught it, we'd be talking a lot about Christian Watson right now. But because of the fact that he dropped it, we're not talking about him. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you talk about Christian Watson. When it comes to the Bears, I do want to talk about the running backs. David Montgomery, 66% of the running back snaps, and he had 21 opportunities next to Khalil Herbert, who people are saying should be started over David Montgomery, who had 29% of the snaps and only 10 opportunities. So just keep that in mind, right? David Montgomery, over 20 opportunities. And again, opportunities are rushes and targets. So it's the opportunities you have with the ball. I still favor Monty here. I'm still using Monty as a wide running back too in this offense. Let's go down here and talk about the Tennessee Titans and the Buffalo Bills. So Buffalo Bills, they got a mixed backfield right now with Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, James Cook, fumbling with his first touch, not exactly ideal. So I'm not going to trust any of these running backs. Wide receiver-wise, Gabriel Davis, he's going to be weekly plug-and-play start for you guys. So officially, Kenneth Walker is playing this week. But yeah, so moving on here, Gabriel Davis, you're starting him every week. Hopefully there's better days for Knox ahead. Again, kind of a rough start, but it is what it is. Henry's not the pass catcher anymore. So we saw Henry be a little bit involved as the pass catcher, Derrick Henry, but he's just not that guy anymore. Dontrell Hilliard doesn't mean I'm starting Dontrell Hilliard. Kind of similar to Devin Duvernay. He had 2 touchdowns, just kind of luck of the draw, but I'm not starting Dontrell Hilliard. When it comes to these wide receivers, you got Traylon Burks, you got Kyle Phillips. We saw what Cooper Kupp did in the slot last game. Kyle Phillips last week, 9 targets, right? He had 42% target rate per route, which was first. Basically, which means on a per route basis, he was targeted more than any other wide receiver in the entire NFL. Yes, that's more than Justin Jefferson. That's more than Cooper Kupp. When this guy was running routes, he was being targeted at a 41% rate. So that's great. It seems like he's already got that chemistry with Ryan Tannehill. The only thing that sucks is he played less than half the game at 46% of the snaps, and he's got a shoulder injury, and he hasn't practiced this week. So there's a chance Phillips does not play in this week, but when he does get on the field, if he does get on the field for this game against the Bills, we saw what Cooper Kupp did in the slot. I think Phillips could be a sneaky play here. Outside of that, Treylon Burks only played 37%. So not enough for us to consider Burks yet. Robert Woods, 71% of the snaps. He only had 2 targets. So keep that in mind. Last game here, we got the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Minnesota Vikings. A bit worried about Miles Sanders. He played 52% of the snaps. Now, Boston Scott came in and played 18% of the snaps. So it was more so as the closer. Sanders had 15 opportunities. I will still roll with Sanders in this game, but just keep in mind if the Eagles end up being down, where they go with the ball, because that'll be very interesting and very telling for the rest of Miles Sanders' season. I do think the Eagles are going to have to throw it a little more in this game with Jalen Hurts. So Devontae Smith, who had 0 catches for the 4 targets that he had, I'm expecting a better game from him. A.J. Brown, he'll do his thing. And on the flip side, the Vikings is not really too much to add, right? Like, you're starting Justin Jefferson, you're starting Dalvin Cook. Adam Thielen, I'd call him a flex / low-end wide receiver 3. So, yep, that's going to wrap up my Week 2 preview for the fantasy football season. If you guys are interested, you can check out Underdog. I don't know if it's here or here. Again, it's kind of inverted. But check out Underdog. You can sign up with my code ANALYST, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. So, cool stuff there. Check it out, and I'll see you guys next week.